Part 3, dialogue with culture and with the world. For those of you who have been following church news closely, you know that rarely does a day pass that there isn't a story about Pope Francis engaging with political leaders, with religious leaders, entering into conversation about the world, about the struggles of people, especially about injustice, but about a wide variety of issues. He is deeply engaged in dialogue with the world on behalf of the church, and he summons us to be engaged in that dialogue. He wants the church to be in the conversation. I think it's really the heart of the message of this talk, right? Pope Francis wants us to be in the conversation about the world, about the church, about poverty, about struggles, about the environment. He has an openness to others, which comes out of his Jesuit Ignatian tradition, the recognition that God is present, that we look for God in all places. And so he looks for traces of God's presence in even unlikely places. So on World Communications Day last year, he wrote, here we're talking about his basic approach to dialogue. We're challenged to be a people of depth, attentive to what is happening around us, and spiritually alert. To dialogue means to believe that the other has something worthwhile to say, and to entertain his or her point of view and perspective. Engaging in dialogue does not mean renouncing our own ideas and traditions, but the claim that they alone are valid or absolute. Elsewhere, he refers to the value of lowering one's defenses to open doors and the virtue of social humility, a nice phrase, social humility in dialogue. It involves a sharing of our deepest convictions in a sincere, respectful way, which can be mutually enriching and renewing. He had an interesting meeting recently with people who work in the television industry. He called them to reawaken the word, to represent the complexity of life in their stories, and to speak to the whole person. And he said these 3 tasks bring to life the culture of encounter, so necessary in an increasingly pluralistic context. Confrontation does not lead anywhere. Creating a culture of encounter, it's an important job for you. A lovely word to those whose vocation is communications. He also calls for the church to have a voice on public issues, public questions. And when he or the rest of us are told, well, churches shouldn't really engage in politics, he says, no, there is a very specific contribution that the church, that religious communities have to make to our societal discussion, which affects the common good. Now, as I mentioned, he speaks frequently about justice, looks for dialogue and cooperation between church and society that's at the service of building a kingdom of justice. For him, the poor are not a general category. In his talks and in his activities, he gives a human face to those who are struggling or in need. When he went to Palestine and met with refugees in the camp, the news stories at the Vatican's request carried the names of the people that he met with. When he went to Brazil, he went into the favelas, to poor neighborhoods, listened to and then helped to name their problems, identify their struggles for the world. He's drawn attention in Rome to the homeless poor that live around St. Peter's. Recently asked that showers be set up for the homeless in that neighborhood around the Vatican. And met with 150 homeless people, gave them a tour of the Sistine Chapel and offered them a meal there. Little gestures which also build relations, but also give a human face to the struggles that many people experience. Now, speaking with a group of students at Jesuit schools, he talked about the importance of not viewing justice issues simply from a theoretical issue. He says, look, you can't speak of poverty without having experience with the poor. You can't speak of poverty in the abstract. That doesn't exist. Poverty, and here he gives a very Christian interpretation, a spiritual interpretation. Poverty is the flesh of the poor Jesus in that child who is hungry, in the one who is sick, in those unjust social structures. His dialogue with us about justice issues often gets very passionate. So one day at a weekly audience, and you probably hear what happened in Rome not long before that, he says, we're living in a time of crisis. Men and women are sacrificed to the idols of profit and consumption. It's a culture of waste. If there are children in so many parts of the world, here I'm paraphrasing from where he said a couple times, where he's spoken a couple times, in so many parts of the world who have nothing to eat, why is that not news? How can we allow people to be thrown aside as if they were trash? How can we stand by when food is thrown away while people are starving? And he talks about how on a winter's night, a person on the Via Ottaviano right beside Rome dies. A homeless person dies on the street. He says, that's not news. The stock market should drop 2%, and that's a tragedy, right? Where are our priorities? He passionately asks. One of the justice issues he's engaged in with representatives from other Christian communities and other religious traditions is in the fight against human trafficking. He and other Vatican offices have been involved in the establishment of something called the Global Freedom Network. And he's been very passionate about us working together to put an end to human trafficking. Not long after he became Pope, there were a series of shipwrecks off the coast of southern Italy, off of Sicily, asylum seekers, refugees trying to come from north of Africa to Europe, and who died at sea. And Pope Francis insisted on going to Lampedusa, to an island just off of Sicily, and gave an extraordinary homily. The whole thing is worth reading and pondering in your spiritual life. This is a very brief excerpt. It's in this homily that I think he first uses this phrase, the globalization of indifference. It's a theme that he's come back to often. Has any of us wept because of this situation and others like it? Has any of us grieved for the death of these brothers and sisters? Has any of us wept for these persons who were on the boat, for the young mothers carrying their babies, for these men who were looking for a means of supporting their families? So a passionate engagement in this issue, and entering into dialogue about a justice question on behalf of the church, summoning the church and the whole society to become engaged. On the environment, he has also become very passionate and engaged. Faced with environmental challenges and the need to protect the planet, he says, and note the urgency in this speech. The time for seeking global solutions is running out. We can find suitable solutions only if we act together and in agreement, hence, engaging in dialogue together. There exists, however, a clear, definitive, unpostponable ethical imperative to act. Quite a string of adjectives to say we need to do something now to save our environment. He's also called for an engagement with science. I've got a number of quotes, but we're not going to be able to go through them all. Let me just take that first one from The Joy of the Gospel. Faith is not fearful of reason. On the contrary, it seeks and trusts reason, since the light of reason, the light of faith both come from God. The church has no wish to hold back the marvelous progress of science. Here, as elsewhere, Pope Francis is not breaking new ground, right? He is treading the path that the church in recent decades has been communicating. But he does it with his own passion and his own sense of urgency. He calls the whole academy that addresses academic institutions, especially Catholic academic institutions, saying they must engage in the complexity of human life and engage in all areas of research and ask questions and allow questions to be asked of the church and allow the church to ask questions in those various fields, that there needs to be a vigorous, pulsing dialogue in our Catholic educational institutions. And as a particularly, he uses phrases in quite a colorful way. This is speaking to an Argentinian Catholic university as they celebrate their centenary, a place where they teach theology, right? We must guard against a theology that spends itself in academic dispute or watches humanity from a glass castle. The Pope urges all the members of the faculty not to satisfy themselves with the theoretical desktop theology, not to give temptation, obviously talking about areas of tension or restlessness, to gloss over it, to perfume it, to adjust it a little and domesticate it. Pope Francis is quite ready to engage in the world and in the human condition in all its messiness. He's comfortable in that mess and calls that the gospel be proclaimed into it and alongside of it.